Hey there, Yeshi here from Yeshi Jackson Fine Art, and today we're going to paint this beautiful bat ray painting. So grab your acrylic paints and your brushes and let's get to it. Okay, I've got my colors here: yellow, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, purple, and black. And of course I got a puddle of white paint in the middle there. I've got my 3 brushes. That's one little detail brush, one big topped oval mop brush, and one filbert brush. That's the one we'll be starting with. And I've got a little bit of water and a couple of paper towels to wash my brushes. So let's go ahead and dip the filbert brush here into the water. Put a little bit of water on our palette next to the yellow paint, and then mix just a speck of that yellow paint, a tiny little bit, into that water. And that's what we'll start sketching our composition with. All right, so we're going to start with a grid on the canvas. We're going to divide it into 3 sections, vertically and horizontally. So let's start by putting a couple of dots on the top of the canvas here. And if you want to check that you've got them sort of evenly spaced, you can use the back of your brush handle, stick it to that first dot and pinch it at the edge, and then see that these distances are pretty close. They don't have to be perfect, but we want to get them pretty close. And if they are, we're going to draw a line down from them. Now we're trying to paint straight lines, but nobody's a robot here, so don't worry about it being perfect. We just want to divide up the space. And then we'll do the same thing along the edge here. Put a couple dots on there. Check with our brush handle measuring device here and see that they're fairly even. It's looking pretty good. And if it makes you more comfortable to put dots on either side and connect them together, that's cool too. Again, we're not trying to get it perfect, just want to get it fairly evenly divided up. Okay, so we've got our grid on the canvas, and now we're ready to start plotting out our points and making our big shapes. Okay, so our first point that we're going to plot on the canvas is going to be right next to where these 2 lines cross. We've got our bottom reference line and our left hand reference line there. And we want to come diagonally up from where they cross about an inch or so. Don't worry about making that exact, but just come up from there a little bit. And then we want to connect that dot with this point where the 2 lines cross with a line that has a slight downward curve. Okay, next we'll come along our bottom reference line, and you want to come in the center of this right-hand box and then go a little bit more to the right. So find the center of that box and then go maybe another half an inch or so to the right and make a dot there. And then what we'll do is connect those dots together. The dot up here and the dot there will be connected with a straight line, or straight-ish. Something like that. And then the bottom of this line here, where these 2 lines cross, and this dot here, we want to connect those together with a line that has a downward curve to it. So I'm going to start here, have a bit of a downward curve, and then meet up with the other line, or the dot there. About like that. It's looking good. Okay, so now let's put a dot along our top reference line, right in the center of the canvas. And then we'll put another dot along the top of the bat ray's body that we've got here. We want to go just a little bit to the left of this right-hand reference line. So maybe about an inch to the left or half an inch to the left. And let's connect those with a straight-ish line there. All right, now I want to connect this same dot up here to the corner of where this long line meets this little line right here. And I want this to be a curve that goes a little bit forward of that dot there. So I'm going to start on that dot and make sure I go a little bit forward and then curve back to that upper dot right there. And let's come to this back section right here. And I want to be right in the center of this box here and a little bit below the top reference line. So maybe about an inch below the top reference line. Put a little dot there. This should be to the left of the very tail end of the body here. And I want to connect that dot with the back end of the body here using a line that curves a little bit to the right. Okay, and then I'm going to connect this dot all the way to the tip of the bat ray's body here with a line that curves downward. And I want this line to curve down, cross where the body crosses this right-hand reference line, and then go all the way to the nose. So it's going to start here, come down to where it crosses these lines here, and then all the way to the tip of the bat ray's body. Okay, so that's our basic outline for the bat ray, and we can go ahead and start filling in the background. Let's go ahead and give our filbert brush a quick rinse. Set that one aside and pick up our large topped oval mop brush. And now what we want to do is mix together some white paint with a little bit of that cobalt blue and a little bit of yellow. That's going to give us a nice sort of an aqua color. There we go, that's looking good. I want to take this color and fill in the top third of the canvas. So from the top edge down to this first reference line, we're going to fill in with this color. Now everybody's color mix is going to be a little bit different. I've painted this picture a couple of times, and each time this color turns out a little bit different based on just how much yellow and blue you mix in there. But that's what makes every painting unique. So don't worry about that. Okay, so we've got that filled in. Now while that paint is still wet, I want to add some highlights to the very top here. So I'll set down that brush that I've been using, that oval mop, and pick up my filbert brush. Put some white paint, just plain white paint on there. And then up in this top left corner, I want to just draw some lines that are kind of swirly. Little lines like that, just to give some highlights. Little ocean ripples. Then after you put the highlights on there, you can kind of smooth them out a little bit since the paint underneath is still wet. You don't want to make them go away completely, but you can kind of smooth out a couple of those edges just so they blend into the background nicely. All right, I like that. So let's give that filbert brush a quick rinse and set it aside and go back to our oval mop. So I've still got that kind of an aqua color on my brush. And now I want to fill in this middle section right here. And for that, I want to use the same colors, the white, cobalt blue, and yellow, but this time I'm going to use more cobalt blue and yellow and less white, so it gets a little darker. And we want to fill in this next third of the canvas here. I find it helpful to go right up against the shape of the bat ray there and give myself a little outline. Might want to do that too. That way when you're filling it in, you don't have to worry about accidentally overlapping the shape of the bat ray there. So don't worry about it blending it into the top section just yet. Let's first of all fill in all this empty space right up to that lighter aqua color. And finally, a little bit back here. Again, we just want to go right up to the other color. And now I want to blend this color and the color above together. So to do that, I just want to get a little bit more white on my brush. to get a color that's sort of in between the two. And I want to start by just going back and forth right where the two colors meet. And I want to just get that hard edge to start to go away. And once you get that hard edge to start to dissolve, I'm just going to go a little bit up into the lighter color, overlapping my brush strokes, not too far up. And then I'm going to go a little bit down into the darker color. Again, overlapping my brush strokes a little bit. And that gives us a nice little blend going there. Let's go a little bit more on this side. And looks like I kind of got a little bit of blank canvas showing through there. I want to cover that up with some more of that color. All right. That's looking pretty good. So let's work on the bottom section of the canvas here. Now for this bottom section, I want to start using my dark blue. That's the ultramarine blue. I still want to use some white. So I'm just going to take some of that ultramarine blue, drag it down and mix it with some white. And you can see I haven't washed my brush off because I don't mind that there's a little bit of this color on my brush still, because I want to blend this section and this section together anyway. And having a little bit of that color on my brush doesn't hurt. So I've mixed some ultramarine blue and white together here. And now I'm just going to fill in this bottom section of the canvas with that color. Might get a little bit more ultramarine there. That looks good. And again, it might be helpful to go ahead and outline the shape of that body just so you don't accidentally overlap it. And we'll just fill in this whole rest of the canvas with that color. All right, that's getting there. Okay, so once again, we want to blend this color with the color above it. And to do that, I just want to get some of that color from the middle section on my brush. So I've still got some on my palette here. I'm just going to get a little bit of that on my brush and just come right here where these two colors meet and go back and forth. And again, I want to get that hard edge to dissolve first, and then I'm going to go a little bit up, and overlapping my brush strokes, I'm going to go a little bit down. All right, that'll work. Let's do the same thing over here. Start where they meet, go a little bit up, and then go a little bit down. All right, that's a pretty nice color fade. Let's call that good for now. And what I want to do now is add a couple of more elements to the background, starting with some ridges of the seafloor there. So I'm going to take this brush that I've been using and give it a little bit of a wipe on my paper towel first. Wipe it off a little bit and then give it a rinse. And then wipe it again and set it aside. That's nice and clean again. Okay, so let's take our little detail brush. And what I want to do now is get a nice dark color. I'm just going to use my ultramarine blue on its own. It's my little detail brush. And about in the center of the canvas, I want to start a line that's going to be kind of a wavy line that goes down. And it's going to go just about to the front of the bat ray's body here. You don't want to necessarily cross over the bat ray's body, so maybe go just a little bit underneath it. So I'll start on the side here. Kind of do a wavy line that goes down. Add a little bit more paint to my brush. And you want to make this line kind of a fat line. I know we're using our little detail brush, but you want to just press down and make it sort of a fat line, because then what we can do is take our filbert brush and, leaving the top edge of that line nice and sharp, I want to blend out the bottom edge of it into this background color. And you can see if we're careful, we can leave that top edge sharp and just blend out the bottom part. And that leaves a nice ridge top there that kind of disappears into the rest of the background. And let's do the same thing down below. We'll do another one. And I want to make sure I don't exactly follow the shape because I want it to be unique. So I'm going to come out a little bit more flat. Again, trying to paint a pretty fat line. with my little detail brush and just go about that far with it. And then once again, I'm taking my filbert brush and just carefully blending out the bottom edge of that line, trying to leave the top edge sharp. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now we might want to do one on the other side here. Let's try one that starts over here, comes down about like that. And once again, we'll blend it out using our filbert brush. Okay, now let's add some kelp to the background. So I'll go ahead and rinse out my detail brush. And for the kelp, we'll start with just some yellow and white, mixing that together on the palette right here. A little bit of yellow, a little bit of white, maybe a little bit more yellow. There we go. That's looking pretty good. And I'm just going to do one kelp plant kind of out in front of it here. And starting at the top, I'm just going to draw the kelp by bouncing the brush against the canvas to make sort of a leafy pattern. And I'm just going to work my way down from the top. And it doesn't have to be solid. We're just going to go like that, kind of in a straight line down, but don't worry if it waves one side or the other, because kelp's always waving around in the water. I'm going to add a couple more leaves up at the top here. And then as the kelp gets down into the lower part of the water here, I want it to get a little darker. And so what I'm going to do is take a little bit of this purple over here next to the yellow and mix those two together. It's kind of a brownish color. And I'm going to start right around the middle of the canvas here and then keep this going down with this brownish color. All right, and then once you get a little bit below the ridges there, then I'm going to rinse my brush off a little bit, put some that ultramarine blue on my brush, and add a few kelp leaves, just kind of going down, and they're going to just sort of disappear into the rest of the ultramarine blue down there. Okay, so that's one branch of the kelp, and we'll add just a couple more. So again, I've kind of rinsed my brush off and starting at the top with that white and yellow, just mixing some white and some yellow together there on my palette. And let's go a little bit below the top of the kelp there, and let's start one on the right here, or sorry, on the left. And I'm just bouncing the brush against the canvas. You don't need to worry about making individual leaf shapes very precisely, just about like that. And since we got this color on the brush, let's go ahead and start one on the other side. So we have a variation in the heights. Let's put this one a little bit higher than that one and a little bit lower than that one. So about like that. And again, I'm just working my way down, bouncing the brush off the canvas to make some sort of random leafy shapes. And once you get down to this level where the brown starts, then we'll go ahead and put some of that yellow and purple mix. That's our brown color. And just start where you left off. Same technique, just bouncing the brush against the canvas. You know, you can work up into the yellow a little bit so that they blend together. Get a little bit more of that color going here. And we'll go down here. And let's connect these together to that main stalk. So I'm just going to sort of work my way towards the center stalk with each of these. So now we have some kelp that's branching out. That's nice. And we can add just a little bit if you want some mini branches kind of coming off. You can add a couple extra little side branches. And you can take your time. I'm moving pretty quickly through this because I want to move on to the next step, but you can add more kelp plants if you want. But I think that looks pretty good. Maybe I'll come down to the bottom and add some more of that ultramarine blue to my little side branches here, just to help them blend out. All right, pretty good. Let's add a couple of fish to the background while we're at it. So I don't want to get too into it and make these really detailed fish. So I'm just going to do something really basic. I'm going to start with my ultramarine blue and a little bit of white on my detail brush here. And I'm going to make a couple shapes. They're just going to be sort of like a flattened out football. So it's going to have a point on one end and a point on the other end and be kind of like an oval shape. And then if you add just a little tail on the end, well, then you got a fish. Do one there, maybe one a little bit smaller below it. Again, you want it to have kind of a point on one end and a point on the other end, and then a little tail. Oops. I'll do that again from the other side here where I can reach it better. Okay, so a flattened out football shape. It's a little like a V on the end for a tail. It's about all you need. Make that one a little bit smoother here. And then let's come down here and put one by the kelp. This one will be bigger. I'll use the same thing, just that ultramarine blue with a little bit of white. And let's have one kind of coming in front of the kelp plant here. Again, it's just sort of a stretched out or flattened out football shape with a little V on the end. I'll have the tail on the other end for this one on the left side. All right, and then if we want to make them stand out from the background a little bit more, we can get some, let's see, rinse the brush a little bit and just get some white on our brush. We can give them a little highlight just along the top edge. Give them all a little highlight here. And again, I'm moving kind of quickly, but you can take your time if you want to put more detail into these fish than I've got. But I think that's looking pretty good for now. So I'm going to rinse this brush, rinsing out my detail brush, wiping it off and setting that one aside. And I'm going to move back to my filbert brush to start filling in the body of the bat ray. Okay, so let's start with this, I don't know if it's called a wing, this big flappy part that sticks out the side, but we'll start with this part right here. Looks like a wing anyway. So I want to start with a light purple color at the top. So I'm just taking some of my purple there, a little bit of white, and let's add a little bit of blue too. So I've got some blue, some purple, and some white. And I'm just going to fill in the top, maybe about a third of it or so. Going all the way to the edge. Okay, and then let's get a little bit darker. So I'm going to add more ultramarine blue now to my brush. Maybe a little bit of purple too. So purple and ultramarine blue mixed together there, make a nice dark color. And we'll fill in sort of the middle of it. Again, you want to paint right up to the edge. Then where this color meets that lighter color above, you just want to let your brush strokes overlap a little bit. You don't want to go all the way up, but just a little bit to help that blend together. That's looking pretty good. And then for the very bottom here of that part, what I want to do is get some black paint so it has a really distinct shadow. So I don't need to rinse my brush off because black paint's going to overpower what else I've got on there. So I'm just putting right into that black paint. And I'll start by kind of outlining the top of the body here so I don't accidentally overlap it. All right, and then I'll just fill in the rest of this bottom of that. I'm calling it a wing. Sorry if you're a marine biologist and you know that it's called something else. And then once again, I'll just overlap my brush strokes a couple times up into the blue to help that fade out. All right, that's looking pretty good to me. Now I'm going to rinse my brush, give it a little wipe, maybe a second rinse because that's a really dark color on there. And let's fill in the top of the body here. So for that, I want to use my purple, sort of a similar color that we used at the top here, but maybe a little bit lighter. So it's purple, white, and a little bit of that ultramarine blue. All right, that color's looking pretty good to me. And we'll just fill in this shape from where we just left off down to this long curving line that goes all the way to the tip of the other wing there. Okay. That's looking pretty good. Now to give this shape here a little bit more dimension, let's add a little bit of darker color right along the bottom edge. So I'm going to wipe my brush off just a little bit and get some of this darker, like this blue that we used in the center of that wing there. So it's the blue and the purple mixed together with just a tiny bit of white. And I'm just going to go along the bottom edge of that shape I just filled in. Just want to give it a little bit of dimension there. Again, once you put the color on there, just overlap your brush strokes a couple times to help it blend together. And then let's go ahead and put a little bit of white on our brush, just white on its own. And let's go along the very top of that shape. So carefully not to blend into the black. I'm just going to go along the very top edge like that. Wipe my brush off a little bit, and then I'll just go kind of halfway on the white and halfway on the purple and blend those together. All right, that's looking pretty good. I like that. Let's make sure we're going all the way back to the long curving line there. Okay. Looking good. So let's start on this portion up here, the other wing here. This is kind of showing us the underside of it. And we'll use the same color at the top here, which is our purple, white, and a little bit of that ultramarine blue. And we'll just do the very tip of it. Now this one, the shading is going to be a little bit different. So I'll just do that tip part first. And then I want to carry on this color along the front edge just about to right there. So right about where the main part of the body starts there. And then let's use a little bit of our darker color. So this same blue and purple mix with less white. And we'll kind of go along the center of it now. And again, we just want to go down to about where the main body crosses over right there. And let's blend the two colors together, overlapping our brush strokes a little bit. All right, that's looking pretty good. And then at the very bottom edge of this color we've just put on there, just sort of bounce your brush around to create this sort of jagged edge, because that's how the color transitions on a bat ray from the dark color to the very light color on its underbelly. Is it's kind of got this splotchy kind of texture to it. So once you blend the two colors together a little bit, make sure you go along the bottom and, you know, give it a funky little splotchy texture. And then at the very back end, like I said, the very back end is going to be the dark part. I'm going to wipe my brush off a little bit and get some black paint on there and fill in just that last little open space. Again, just down. Let's bring it all the way where it meets the back of the body there. And you can kind of give it that same splotchy kind of edge. filling in the open space, and then when you get to where the blue is, just overlap those brush strokes a little bit. Blend those together. All right, looking pretty good. I'm going to bring the black a little bit higher on the back edge here. And then just going to rinse my brush again, and then use a dry brush to sort of smooth these colors together just a little bit along the top. All right. I'd say that's looking pretty good. Now we want to fill in the underbelly. So for that part, we're going to use, basically it's going to be white and yellow, but we'll use a little tiny bit of purple so that it kind of is a little bit less bright. Okay, so it's white and yellow and getting a little tiny bit of that purple in there to cut the brightness. All right, I'm just going to fill in all the open space first. Going right up to our little funky splotchy edge there. And all the way to the front. And now to give this underbelly portion a little bit more dimension, I want to create a shadow that goes right down the center of where it's kind of folding over, where it's folding up like that. So for that, I'm going to rinse my brush, get the light color off of it. And I want to get a nice dark shadowy color. So I don't want to use black because it's just a little bit too strong. So I'll use my ultramarine blue and purple mix here. And I'll start off with just a line that goes right down the center. Okay. Maybe add a little bit more color to that so it's a stronger shadow. All right, now, a little bit tedious, but I want to wipe my brush off, give it a quick rinse again. And now that my brush is fairly clean, I'm going to go along the top edge. You know, this line's a little bit wide, so I just want to go along the top edge where it meets the yellow and blend it out like that. Okay? Now I'm going to wipe my brush, give it a quick rinse again. And I'll go along the bottom edge of this line we just painted. And just careful to go halfway on and halfway off. I'm going to go across and blend out the bottom edge of that. So now we have a nice sort of a shadow where it's rolling up like that. All right, looking pretty good. Let's add a few details to the bat ray. So I'll give this filbert brush a rinse and set it aside. So on the front end of the bat ray, we got to give it its eye, don't we? And the eye has kind of like an indentation around it. So let's do that part first. So I'm going to use my ultramarine blue and purple mixture. Nice and dark. Not really adding any white to it this time, just all blue and a little bit of purple. And you can kind of start right about the center of this wing shape sticking up in the background, and height wise you want to go about the center of this upper part of the body. So I'm going to start there and I want to go forward and then down. I'm going to sort of follow the shape of the front of the head there. I'm going to make it a little bit darker. So again, starting left to right, you want to go like the center of that wing, and then height wise you want to go the center of this section of the body. I'm going over and down like that. All right, that's looking pretty good. Let's take our filbert brush now. And just like we did with these background ridges, I want to leave the top edge of that sharp, but blend out the bottom. So just careful to grab just a little bit of it, leaving the top edge sharp and blending out the bottom. There we go. So then I'll go back to my detail brush, and I'm going to get some black paint on there. So the detail brush with the black paint, and right where this kind of turns a corner there, I'm going to put a little black circle for the eye. All right, looking pretty good. Now I'm going to rinse my detail brush, and we're going to put a few highlights on here, and we'll call it done. So, using my freshly rinsed detail brush and just some white paint on its own. Okay, I'm going to go along the very front edge of the wing shape here. You can kind of curve over the top just a little bit. All right, that's pretty good. Let's go along the front edge of this other wing shape here. Again, we're going to just go along the front edge, but if you want to sort of curve it around the top just a little bit like that, that's cool. And then we'll go, you can see I'm anchoring, just using my pinky resting on the canvas like this. That's fine to do with acrylics because this layer of the background is already dry. I'm going to go all the way down. We're going to go all the way down to the very front with that white highlight. All right, looking pretty good. Let's maybe highlight the very top of the body there too. So again, just using the white. I'm going to go along the very top edge there. And then finally, let's give it a little bit of a highlight on its eye. So just a little speck of white right there. All right, looking pretty good. Oh, there's one thing we're still missing, which is the tail. They've got this thin, spiky little tail that sticks out. So let's add that. I'm going to use my ultramarine blue and a little bit of that purple. And just a little bit above the bottom of the body there, just a little bit up from that, I'm going to start a line here, and I want it to go down to a point. So starting here and then lifting up on my brush to get it a little bit thinner. It's going to go almost to the edge of the canvas. All right, that's going to work. Now I'm going to rinse my brush, and let's put a little bit of white on our brush and give that tail just a little highlight. Okay, looking pretty good. Okay, before we call this done, I feel like this section down here could use a little bit more texture. So I'm going to add, using my ultramarine blue, just on its own, maybe a little tiny bit of purple. I just want to add a little bit of texture to my forest, or my ocean floor, sorry. So I'm just kind of coming across the bottom with a bumpy sort of wavy line like that. Maybe we can do another one just behind it. And then to blend that out so it's not so chunky, we can just add a little bit of white to our brush. So we have a color that's similar to our background color. And go along the bottom edge of that lumpy line we just painted. So again, we want it to have a sharp edge at the top and then be blended out on the bottom. All right, I like that a lot better. Feels more complete to me. All right, well, I hope you had a good time painting this bat ray with me. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. And I'll be adding a lot more of these fun paint-alongs soon. Thank you.